Welcome to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. I'm the sports editor of the Herald Democrat, Jason Del Rosa, and you're listening to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. We are about to enter Week 9. District standings are taking shape to decide playoff teams, seeds, who's going home in a couple of weeks, who will play on. Maybe deep into November, maybe into December. It's all starting to take shape as we enter the final stages of the regular season. And we will do what we always do here on the podcast. We will look ahead at this week's games. We will talk about what they mean. We'll look back at what happened in the prior week's action. And we'll break it all down here on the podcast. So again, if you're new to the podcast, welcome. If you're new to the podcast, where you been for 9 weeks? Because we've had 2 months of some great football action from the top to the bottom, everything in between. And we'll kick off our look at Week 9, as we always do, working our way from the top to the bottom. And we will start with the Sherman Bearcats in their 6-5A Division I matchup against Frisco Lone Star, which is at 7 o'clock on Friday at Bearcat Stadium. Sherman comes into this game at 2-5. 1-4 in district play after they lost 59-0 against Frisco Reedy. And they are hosting Lone Star, who is 6-1 overall and 5-0 in district play. To quickly recap the game last week, because there's not a whole heck of a lot to talk about in this 59-0 loss. The starting point of our conversation will be that there was a quarterback injury with Caleb Orr not being able to play. Coach Alleman said it was a game-time decision, and so obviously that's going to change any team, no matter who they are, to go from basically the person who's taken every single available snap at the most important position on the offense, to switch that up against a really good team is not ideal, and it turned out that way. Sherman finished with just 22 yards of offense. They did not complete a pass between the 11 throws of Cooper Morgan and Jerkavian Hughes. There were 3 interceptions in those 11 throws. There was also a fumble. Sherman had 5 first downs, only had 9 yards in the first half. Ended up with the 22 yards on 33 carries, and Hughes was the leading rusher with 7 carries for 17 yards. So not a whole lot more to say about this game. Obviously, when your main guy is unavailable on short notice, that's going to make life difficult for your offense, and that's what happened. We talked about the stretch of games that Sherman was entering, about how important that was to sort of stay in the race. They are now at the point of there is no margin for error. Their next loss is going to eliminate them from the playoff chase, because the top 3 are pretty much clearly defined at this point. Lone Star and Frisco are both 5-0. Frisco Reedy is sitting at 5-1, and Frisco Heritage is at in 4th place at 4-2, and Wakefield is right behind at 3-2. And then Sherman is next. However, they are 1-4 with the 3 games left. So if Sherman's going to have any hope, they're going to have to win their final 3 games, which would be Lone Star, which would be Wakeland next week, which is obviously, like we said, the team that's right in front of them, so they would have a chance right there. And then they end with Frisco Liberty, which is winless on the season. So you'd have to like your chances there. But obviously it's these next 2 that are going to decide if Sherman can stay in the race to that point. This was the point last year that Sherman was eliminated, and then they won their last 2 games to get to 3-5 in district, but obviously finishing a couple games out of the playoffs. And so this is the start of and we'll probably talk about this with 3 or 4 teams. You're starting to run out of games if you want to be in this mix, and this is the point for Sherman. And obviously, we'll see. The big question is going to be if Caleb Orr is not available, how is that going to approach things? Whether it's Is he available for this week, next week? Depending on the severity of the injury. As I talk to you on this, I have not gotten an update on that, and I won't until later in the week after this has been taped. However, I would speculate, as just throwing things out there, that if you're willing to have him be a game time decision, it's obviously not a super serious injury to where he's definitively out. But that may change depending on how things go this week leading up to the game against Lone Star. Obviously, just as tough, if not tougher, than what Reedy was. If you're trying to compare, obviously, Lone Star beat Reedy. That's their only loss, and like we mentioned last week, it was on a touchdown pass with no time left to win by 3. So those are very obviously comparable programs. Lone Star is. I said last week about Reedy, about them not being ranked, and they probably should be. If they're not, they're as close as you can be to being ranked without being ranked. Lone Star is actually ranked in the top 10. They are 9th in this week's poll. And then, like I said, Wakeland's usually a pretty good team coming in next week. So it's not going to get any easier, even if just a little bit, taking on the Lone Star team. Quite frankly, that is playing for a lot too, because like I said, nobody in this district has clinched a playoff spot yet. I don't think anybody's going to be able to clinch a playoff spot after this week of games going into the final 2 weeks, because a lot of the teams still have to play each other. There's a lot of tiebreakers at play. But if you're Sherman, bare minimum is you need to win out to get to 4-4 and hope that some people lose in front of you. Obviously, like we said, you can definitely get that with Wakeland being right in front of you. But after that, you're going to need some help, and you're going to need some tiebreakers if you're going to sneak in. But it's going to start this week as we hit the final couple games for Sherman as they host Lone Star. Again, that's at 7 o'clock at Bearcat Stadium on Friday night. Going down to talk about the Denison Yellow Jackets. They are going on the road to Princeton for their 7-5A Division II contest. Denison is 3-4, 1-3 in district play after they lost 40-14 against Melissa, and Princeton is 1-6, and they are also 1-3 in district play after they lost 42-8 against Terrell. So to talk about Denison's game last week, we mentioned obviously number 1 team in the state coming up here to play, and the final score obviously looks a little lopsided, but this was a game going to the final minutes of the first half. It was only a 6-point game. Melissa was up 20-14. Denison was hanging around. A late touchdown makes it 26-14, and even then, that's relatively doable. 12-point game at halftime. And you've got plenty of time to make that up. However, Denison does not score in the second half. Melissa scores a couple touchdowns to pull away to win 40-14. Ty Rhodes returned to the starting lineup at quarterback. Was 10 of 24 passing for 111 yards with a touchdown and an interception. He also ran 13 times for 58 yards and a score. Jack Allman had that touchdown catch as part of 2 catches for 49 yards. And he ran 21 times for 61 yards. But obviously, it's been the theme during this stretch, much like last year, not being able to get over the hump against arguably the 3 best teams in the district. While the scores were better in a lot of respects this year compared to last, especially defensively, the question going forward with Denison is their offense in the second half. This week, no points. Last week against Terrell, no points in a game that they would lose by seven. And then in the Lovejoy game, they were 20-something seconds away from being shut out in the second half. In that game, they do get on the board there, so that's basically one touchdown in the last 3 games in the second half. That's just not going to get it done unless you just open up a gigantic lead at halftime, which Denison has not been able to do, trailing in 2 of those 3 games and then leading one of those other games by 6. So that's obviously a thing to watch going forward. So they're playing a Princeton team who has only the 1 win. It was against Mesquite Poteet, who we will point out does not have a win at all on the season. And that was a 27-21 win. So Princeton is literally a good drive by Poteet from being in the Poteet's spot in the standings, and with an 0-7 record instead of being 1-6. As things stand in this district, it's Melissa and Lovejoy on that collision course for first place. The only undefeated teams, both with 2-game leads on everybody else in the district. Crandall, Terrell, and Greenville are 2-2, and then Denison and Princeton are 1-3. Again, much like with Sherman, the same scenario is in play for Denison, except if they win out, unless some crazy things happen along the way, that should clinch them a playoff spot. Probably the 4th seed. They'll have to start with Princeton this week, beat Crandall next week at home, and then go on the road to play Poteet, like we mentioned, who is winless in the last game of the season. And essentially, if you were to do that, you would probably be in 4th place and beat the 3 teams below you in the standings. Like I said, unless something crazy happens and it comes down to a tiebreaker. But again, we're in a mode for Denison where you cannot slip up. Your mulligans are over. You got to win this week against Princeton. You got to win next week against Crandall. And you got to win the last game against Poteet. You lose any of those 3, and you're going to end up on the outside when all's said and done. And you don't want to be 5th place like you were last year, finishing a game out of the playoffs there. And so, again, it's all in front of them. Again, this is what happened last year. They beat Princeton, then they lost to Crandall, and then they beat Poteet. Obviously, the Crandall game last year, starting quarterback last year, Josh Kurtenbach, gets injured early. It's a game played in rainy, wet conditions. We had a weather delay. Pretty much, everything that could go wrong sort of went wrong in that game. To fall behind like they did, and then were unable to catch up. But that's the swing game. Denison playing a Princeton team that they usually handle. They've won all 5 of the games against Princeton. Last year it was 67-26. Denison scored at least 43 points in every game against Princeton. The only thing, maybe if you're looking at it from a Princeton perspective, they're in the same boat. They actually need some help if they were to win out, but they would at least give themselves a chance. And again, you're talking to your kids about being 1-0 and winning this week, and you can't win it all this week, but you might be able to lose it. Like I said, if the loser of this game, probably pending the other outcomes in this district, if not this week, next week is going to be out. I don't think 4 wins, 4 losses is probably going to be too much to overcome. So must-win game for Denison, going on the road and facing a team that is going to be just as desperate as they are. Like I said, I feel really good about them winning 2 of these last 3. And then the big question, like I said, is that Crandall game. Are they going to be able to find a way to win that one? Right now, I would lean towards Denison just because they have the home field advantage. That's a not an easy trip. As someone who went to Crandall last year, you kind of have to maneuver either back roads or deal with traffic, so that can make it feel like a long version. And to be fair, the games that they've played already, if you want to play the comparative score game, they got beat badly last week against Crandall against Lovejoy 76-0. Obviously, the Denison game was closer against Lovejoy. They have, Denison beat Greenville by a larger margin. Put up more scores better scores against them. The Melissa game, if you want to compare that score, where you can talk about, yes, Crandall put up more points, but the game was less competitive. Crandall gave up 4 more touchdowns than what Denison did. So it's going to be an interesting stretch again. It's coming down to the last 3 weeks. You got to win them all. Coach Whitson said going into the Melissa game, we got to win 3 out of 4. It didn't necessarily matter which 4 or which 3. But if you could beat, the number 1 team, that would go a long way towards confidence and everything. The final 3 games. But it's going to come down to treating every week like a playoff game the rest of the way if Denison's going to get into the playoffs with their trip to Princeton for 7-5A Division II action on Friday night at 7:30. Moving down to the 4A level, where we find the Van Alstyne Panthers. They also headed on the road this week as they go to Bridgeport for their 5-4A Division II contest. This is a big contest in this district. Again, nobody has clinched yet. Van Alstyne is on the way to doing so. They won last week against Farmersville, 27-14. So Van Alstyne is now 4-3 overall and 3-1 in district, while Bridgeport lost 42-26 against Gainesville. So they are 1-6 and 1-2. And so last week against Farmersville, Weston Johnson had a hand in all 4 of the touchdowns. 14 of 22 passing, 182 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He also runs 18 times for 95 yards and 2 scores there. Castor Fonseca, 4 catches, 70 yards, and a touchdown. Jackson Skinner's lone catch, 30-yard touchdown. Brady Carson, 8 carries for 62 yards and 4 catches for 54 yards. This game was not necessarily as close as that score looks. It was 27-0. Into the early stages of the fourth quarter, and even then, once Farmersville scores, still is a 3-score game, and they got the last touchdown, with like a minute or so left. So a little deceiving on the final score, but Van Alstyne's able to continue to follow the exact same road that they were on last year, sitting at 3-1 in district. The lone loss to Aubrey, and this is a huge game in this district because, again, you have a Gainesville team that's in 3rd place at 2-2, and then right behind them is Bridgeport, Farmersville, and Crum, all at 1-2, and all have key games, obviously this week, that could swing, the middle of this district. Obviously, if Van Alstyne's unable to do what they did last year, which is beat everybody but Aubrey, sort of changes the math a little bit. And Bridgeport's only win, if we want to play the comparison game, was against Farmersville. It was a close game, single digits, and so maybe there's not much of a difference between Van Alstyne and Bridgeport, but Bridgeport struggled to score points. Like I said, outside of the win, and you've got like we've mentioned with Van Alstyne, they have 2 games left. They have this week and they have next week, and they have the bye to finish. So they can pretty much lock up the 2nd seed while everybody else is playing, and know that they're good to go. They can rest up and be ready. And so it's going to be interesting to see. They can clinch a playoff spot with a win this week. And try to avoid the fray of everybody getting sort of involved the final couple weeks. Aubrey's in position to lock up a spot as well, and so half of the spots may be gone with 2 weeks left if Van Alstyne's able to take care of business. I think obviously the one thing that's interesting about them and that I'm going to focus on for the preview that I'm going to do for them this week is in district play. Even the loss that they've had, they've been really good defensively in all the games. Aubrey has scored the most points against them, having it be 17. And again, that's really not something you see a whole lot of in districts these days, or just against offenses in general. It's really hard to not give up points. But last week, Vanelsi's done a really good job in district play. So far, they've allowed 14, 13, 17, and 14 in the four district games. So the defense has been really good, and that's sort of kind of going to be my focus of the preview as they try to wrap up a playoff spot, potentially the 2 seed, and get ready for their last game next week, which is going to be against Gainesville. But Bridgeport is first, and like I said, you've got Farmersville obviously knew that their game was going to be key this week. Bridgeport knows how big this game is for them, and Gainesville, as they try to hold on to the third spot and try to get second place on a tiebreaker potentially with Van Alstyne to get the seconds to get a better seed for the playoffs. So going to be interesting to see if Van Alstyne can continue to take care of business as they go visit Bridgeport on Friday night in 5-4A Division II play. The one team that is not playing this week from our coverage area is the Whitesboro Bearcats. They have the district bye in 4-3A Division I. They are coming off the 63-3 loss against Brock. This was a game where the only scoring is a Victor Chavez field goal in the first quarter. It actually made it 7-3, but Brock turns things on, is up 21-3 after the first quarter, 42-3 at halftime on the way to the big victory for them. Brett Donaldson, 4 catches for 60 yards. Max Parker, 13 carries for 58 yards, but real struggle for the Bearcats. We talked about obviously this stretch for them, essentially facing 2 of the best teams in the state. I don't want to say easily the 2 best teams in the district, but obviously Brock. We talked about how they've just dominated people since district play started, and then Whitesboro goes on their bye this week, and then they will play at Paradise next week. And so obviously we mentioned with Paradise and Brock, those are the 2 undefeated teams left in the district. Whitesboro is still in a really good spot. They're in third place. They're 3-1. Ponder right behind it 2-1, and then like we mentioned, the 3 at the bottom, Peaster, Pilot Point, and Boyd are still 0 for just because they haven't played each other yet. That's going to be coming up. Obviously, there is a chance that Whitesboro is able to clinch a playoff spot this week despite not playing, because Ponder is playing Peaster, and so that's a chance there for Peaster to lose another game, and then Brock and Paradise play each other, so obviously that's a key game for seeding there, and somebody's going to be in sole possession in first place, and then Pilot Point plays Boyd, and so if you're Whitesboro, what you're looking for to clinch your playoff spot, you want Ponder to beat Peaster, and you want Boyd to beat Pilot Point. If those things happen, Whitesboro will officially lock up its playoff spot for yet another year, and then will probably come down to that last game against Ponder to determine who gets third and who gets fourth. But so Whitesboro's still in a good spot despite the loss to Brock. It hasn't phased them in the past, so I don't think it's necessarily going to phase them right now. But they do have the bye week. They're the only team that does not have a game this week, getting ready for their big trip to Paradise next Friday night. Moving over to 5-3A Division 1, that's where Pottsboro is. And Pottsboro is coming off their first loss of the season, 52-28 against Winsboro in the big key matchup in not only for that district but for the state. We talked about how that was two state-ranked teams going toe-to-toe. Unfortunately, Pottsboro was unable to keep pace in that one, and so they'll look to rebound this week when they play Emory Reigns at home at 7 o'clock. So again, note that start time. Pottsboro 6-1 and 2-1 in district play. Emory Reigns is 0-7 and 0-3 in district play after they lost against Mount Vernon 42-12. So in this game, obviously, we talked about last year, this was a close game in the second half. Pottsboro put together a huge rally. They were going to need a huge rally in this one as well after they fall behind 21-0 after the first quarter, 42-21 at halftime. They did make it 42-28 in the semi-early in the third. And you start thinking about last year where they were down 18 points and they were able to come back and win by one. But unfortunately this year, unable to muster any points after that, going basically the last quarter and a half without scoring again. And Winsboro's able to tack on some points in the second half to win comfortably. Major McBride led Pottsboro as he normally does. 26 carries for 233 yards and 3 touchdowns. Caden Humphrey, 6 carries for 80 yards and a touchdown. Brady Fulton with 2 catches for 32 yards. Humphrey and Trulock combined to go 7 of 20 passing with an interception and just 57 yards. And obviously that's sort of where, if you're just looking at box score wise, that's sort of where the difference was. Both teams ran the ball really well. Winsboro also was really effective in the passing game, and not just in completion percentage, but also in the raw yardage. And that was sort of the difference there. And obviously there was a turnover, and it was an interception for Pottsboro. So 52-28 is the final there. If we're looking ahead to what is on the docket that's left for Pottsboro, you have this game against the winless Emory Reigns team that they beat last year 52-7. I would anticipate that is it's good timing to get back on track. And then after that, we start talking about seeding. Obviously, the final 2 games that Pottsboro has, going to Commerce, hosting Mount Vernon. Those are the 2 that are going to decide who gets second, who gets third, who gets fourth. Obviously, the way Bills is going, it's pretty. It's a safe bet that obviously that was taken care of. So the only question is going to be, can you, once you get past this week and what should be a relatively easy win, can you buckle down and get the wins you need to, at the very least, get the second seed? I don't see anybody else beating Winsboro. Commerce and Mount Vernon have already played. Winsboro. So, we mentioned last week, for all intents and purposes, this game between Pottsboro and Winsboro was going to decide the district championship, and that's it's been that way. I think 3 of the 4 years that this district has been together, and so I think that's obviously, this will be the third time in 4 years that happens, that this game ends up deciding the district title. So we'll see if Pottsboro can bounce back when they host Emory Reigns in 5-3A Division I action at 7 p.m. On Friday night. Moving down to the 3A Division II ranks. We will visit the SNS Rams, who will be going on the road in 6-3A Division II action to face Holiday. SNS lost last week 47-21 against Valley View, so they are 0-7 and 0-2. And Holiday won 28-21 against Henrietta, so they are 6-1 overall and 2-0 in district play. Just to touch on Holiday real quick, that score against Henrietta, a little bit of a surprising result. I think a lot of people thought that game would be not as close. But okay, you're also talking about a Holiday program. Anybody around here knows about them. They've knocked off Bells a couple times in the region semifinals. Then they've lost, all those times, getting to the next round, losing to Gunner. So they've been, they've been really good. They did make some changes at graduation. They had a coaching change, but they're still sort of rolling along. They're ranked in the top 10, and they're on their way to another district title. They are the only undefeated team in the district right now. Again, it's a small district. You only play the 5 games. Obviously, if they win this game, they'll be at 3-0. And like I said, that would most likely clinch a playoff spot for them, but obviously just put them one step away from winning another district title. Whereas SNS, a positive result, even if though it ends in a loss. We've talked about the struggles that they've had putting points on the board. Obviously, this week able to do that a little bit better with Braden Turner running 8 times for 59 yards and a touchdown. He also had a 20-yard touchdown pass to Paige Morgan. Turner was a 6 of 15 passing for 94 yards with that touchdown and 2 interceptions. Morgan had 2 catches for 40 yards. Asher Zuniga, 3 catches for 37 yards. Hunter Corville returned a kickoff 75 yards for a score. And obviously just a little bit better for SNS. But again, in this district, this was obviously an early key game with the winner sort of controlling their destiny. And now, SNS is 0-2. There's 4 teams that are at 1-1. But now the problem is obviously, Callisburg and Valley View are teams that have already beaten SNS. So basically, you've got to beat Henrietta and City View, and you might need some help. But you've got to get to 2 and 3. Assuming you aren't able to win this week against Holiday, you're gonna have to win the last 2, and even then it might not be enough depending on just how close the other games in this district have been. So that's where SNS sits. Like I said, they took a step forward in a couple areas, and hopefully they can continue on that path to try to remain in the mix at least through the last game of the season. But like I said, this week's going to be a tough one as they go to first place Holiday in 6-3A Division II action. Sliding over to District 8-3A Division II, we will talk about the all-local game in this district for this week, and that is Howe traveling to Bells. Howe is sitting at 3-4 overall, 1-1 in district play. Excuse me, 0-2 in district play. After they lost 82-0 last week against Gunner. Bells is 1-1 in district play. They bounced back from their loss in the district opener to Gunner by winning 60-21 against Blue Ridge last week. So they are 5-1 overall and 1-1 in district play. This is a series that recently Bells has sort of dominated. They've won 4 of the last 5, and this is obviously an interesting scenario for Howe, because like we mentioned, they're coming off this large loss to Gunner, the worst loss in school history. Couldn't really move the ball. Gave up a lot of returns, whether it was the special teams, on defense. Had some rough snaps that led to some safeties. Had to deal with some injuries. Guys were sidelined. That are normally starters, namely Knox Bounds, in the backfield, and obviously it was going to be tough no matter what, because you're taking on a Gunner team that is ranked number 1 in the state. So I think the one thing, if there is a sort of a silver lining to that, is I don't know how many people expected how to win that game anyway, and if you're looking at the people that you need to beat around you. Obviously, Bell's is sitting here at 1-1, and you've got your final 2 games against Blue Ridge and Lone Oak. And if you win those 2, you're almost 100% in. Or if not, you're pretty close. But it'd probably be a scenario like last year, coming down to tiebreakers and all that other stuff. So. How's gonna jump back on it and really get going after like I said, a game last week where they ended up with a negative 27 yards, did not have a passing yard, only had 2 first downs, and just it was being down 31-0 after the first quarter, obviously setting the tone and not really being able to compete going from there. Bells did what Howe was hoping to do after they got beat 64-6 in the district opener by Gunner. They had a big game against a Blue Ridge team that's trying to stay in the mix, trying to get as good a seed as it can. But Bells is able to use the big middle 2 quarters to break this thing open. It was only 13-7 after the first quarter, with Bells in the lead, and they went into halftime. I don't want to say semi-close, but it's 37-21. That's only a 2-score game. But Blue Ridge doesn't score in the second half. Bells scores 3 times in the third quarter, like I mentioned, to break things open, doing the things that Bells does, running for 447 yards. Easton Helgren leading the way, 9 carries for 236 yards and 4 touchdowns. Hayden Allen with 9 carries for 117 yards and 2 scores. He also had 5 2-point conversions, and that's a significant enough number. I think that's worthy of mentioning. Bryson Thompson, 6 carries for 75 yards and 2 scores for him as well. And things went about as well as they could for the Panthers, and so like I said, they're in the same spot as last year. Obviously, they've been really good against everybody in this district that's not named Gunner, and I think obviously the feeling on that seems to be somewhat mutual. It's just a question of can you take advantage of the things in front of you. Obviously, like we said, you're facing a team coming off such a lopsided loss, dealing with injuries. Can you jump up early, not give them any hope, or are they gonna hang around for a little bit? But obviously, it's a huge game. More so for Howe. I think you're not totally eliminated if you lose this game. But I think it's one of those games you want to try to find a way to win. And if you can beat Bells, you can beat anybody. And obviously Bells comes in knowing, hey, we normally beat everybody except for Gunner. So let's not start now when it comes to losing to other teams along the way. So Bells is going to be hosting Howe in 8-3A Division II action on Friday night. And the other game in this district obviously is the Gunner Tigers as they host Lone Oak. Gunner is 7-0 and 2-0 in district after that 82-0 win last week. And Lone Oak is 3-4 and 1-1 after they surprised Leonard and won that game 44-41, and that snapped a 19-game district losing streak by the Buffaloes by finding a way to win that game. Would I give Lone Oak any chances to repeat that this week and pull off one of the most shocking upsets that you would see? Probably not. I will say this does not feel like the team that Gunner beat 85-0 last year. They have been better. They're sitting here at 3-4. They weren't even close to that last year. Like we said, the game against Gunner was so lopsided. And even in just the last three meetings, Gunners outscored Lone Oak 225-21. Is it entirely possible that this game resembles the two games that Gunner has played so far? I could see that as a yes. You look at the game against Howe, and you look at the numbers, and you sit there and go, they didn't even have 300 yards of offense, but they returned 3 punts for touchdowns. Easton Overman had 1, and Cannon Lemberg had 2. Jax Graham returned a kickoff after one of the safeties for a touchdown. And Marshall Majors had an interception return for a touchdown. There was another safety. So just on return touchdowns and safeties, Gunner would have won this game 39-0, even if the offense hadn't done anything. And the offense, like I said, didn't do a whole lot in this game because it didn't have to, because the scores were so out of control and the returns were just easy pickings there that they weren't able to have to use a lot of offense. Cohen Scallon had a 35-yard touchdown catch from Walker Overman, who, in addition, he only threw 3 passes, completed 2 of them. One was an interception. That's his first interception in his, I guess that's 22 so it happened in his 22nd game that he threw his first interception. Only threw for 55 yards. And Overman also had a 22-yard touchdown on his lone carry. Dylan Tokar's had a touchdown run. Braden Hinton had a touchdown run. And that was Kane Bolt and Easton Overman had touchdown runs in the second half when the game was out of reach. It was 59-0 at halftime. But we say this every week about Gunner. They just keep rolling along. I would assume that this week is going to be no different. But again, Lone Oak is definitely improved. And I feel like a lot of people go into these matchups with Gunner and they know they don't have anything to lose. So who knows what they're going to try. And we'll see. Like I said, it seems like Gunner's just going to roll into the playoffs. But who knows? You never know. But Lone Oak's going to give it a try with their trip to Gunner in 8-3A Division II action on Friday night. Going down to the 2A ranks, we will first hit our stop in 6-2A Division I. We have 3 games to talk about there because we don't have any local crossover this week. And we'll work our way down the district because the big game in this district this week is the Tioga Bulldogs hosting Nakona. Tioga is 5-2 and 2-0 in district play after it won 61-12 against Alvord, and Nakona is sitting at 6-0 and 2-0 as well after they won 48-36 against Trenton. And so this is obviously a huge game for a variety of reasons. None bigger than the fact that the winner of this game gets sole possession of first place and has the inside track to the district championship with just 2 games remaining. This was a game last year that Tioga won 35-21. And this is obviously the one to watch. Nakona was undefeated going into the Trenton game last year, they lost. They obviously, they flipped that result, and I think they are sort of thinking this is their year after dropping a couple of district games last year. I think they sort of see them as contenders. Excuse me, as contenders to take down Tioga. But the Bulldogs are rolling. We talked about early in the season, new offense, new coaching staff, trying to figure things out. But they've really got it going now. You put up 61 points. Talking about obviously the way they do it. Hayden Hilliard, 31 of 44 passing for 408 yards and 7 touchdowns. Austin Norwood, 8 catches for 129 yards and a touchdown. He also had 2 carries for 53 yards and a score. Slade Babbitt, 8 catches for 97 yards and a touchdown. Gage Anderson, 4 catches for 70 yards and a touchdown. And 2 touchdowns. And he also ran 5 times for 46 yards. Jonah Grubbs, 4 carries for 47 yards and a score. Johnny Dorpinghouse only had 29 yards receiving, but he made the most of his 4 catches, with 3 of them going for touchdowns. And this was a game, it was 22-0 after the first quarter. Alvord did score twice in the second quarter to get their 12, but Tioga well on their way in that one to stay undefeated as the defending district champ. And like we said, this is a huge swing game for district title, for seeding, all that sort of stuff. Tioga's got the home field, and it will be interesting to see what happens when Nakona comes to town to face Tioga in 6-2A Division I action on Friday night. The next game in that district, Whitewright is going to travel to Trenton for their 6-2A Division I game. Whitewright is sitting at 2-5 and 0-2 after they lost 27-8 against Tom Bean. And like we mentioned, Trenton is coming off their 48-36 loss to Nakona, and that makes them 3-4 overall and 0-2 in district play. You don't want to say that this is a must-win playoff atmosphere type game, but it kind of is. I don't know if the loser of this game is going to be able to get into the mix at 2-3. And of course, we will mention that right now, if the playoffs ended today, or let's just say if the playoffs ended after this week, the winner of this game would be in the playoffs because Tom Bean is not eligible. And so this is a huge game in terms of that aspect of if Tom Bean does finish in the top 4, they just slide everybody up a slot. So you want to be 5th and not 6th if that ends up playing out. And right now that would be the case. We mentioned with Whitewright, we've talked about it a couple times the last couple weeks. The defense has been really good. Obviously, 27 points is somewhat manageable, but unfortunately, again, they only pick up the 1 touchdown. It comes in the fourth quarter on a 63-yard pass from Colt Yancey to Ian Travis. Kenneth York has 27 carries for 130 yards, but that was all Whitewright was able to muster after trailing 27-0 after 3 quarters, and it's just been really rough on Whitewright trying to figure some stuff out with that new offense that they're just not able to string a lot of success together. But if you're gonna get into the playoffs these last 3 games, you can build on some things here and there, and if you can find a way to win the last 3 for sure, I think you're in. Again, you might be able to lose one, but it better be the right one when it comes down to tiebreakers. So we'll see what this Battle of Tigers looks like after they square off on Friday with Whitewright going to Trenton. And then the last game in 6-2A Division I, the Tom Bean Tomcats will be hosting Alvord. And this is also an interesting game because right now those 2 teams are tied for third place. And so the winner of this game is going to be tied with the loser of the Tioga-Nakona game for second place. Again, we've talked about with Tom Bean. This is the last year that they're not eligible for the playoffs. They're playing for pride, and I said it 2 weeks ago, and I think I said it last week as well. Don't be surprised if Tom Bean picks somebody off, and last week Tom Bean picked somebody off with the 27-8 win. Bobby Rogers leading the way, 14-22 passing for 132 yards and 2 touchdowns, 13 carries for 97 yards and a touchdown. Garrett Kelly was the top receiver, 3 catches for 82 yards and a score. Braylon Barrett, 8 catches for 40 yards and a score. And McGuire Poole with 4 carries for 50 yards and a touchdown for Tom Bean, which as they go into this game, they are now 4-3 overall and 1-1, while Alvord is 4-2, 1-1 after that loss against Tioga. And the story with Tom Bean, like we have said, cause as much chaos as possible, cause as much disruption as possible, see if you can get as many wins as possible to build on going into next year, seeing what realignment does. But you've had the success. They're this close to avoiding a losing record. They've won 4 games so far, and out of 7 games, that's as many as the previous. Was it 3 years combined? 3 or 4 years combined? 3. So they've won as many games in 7 games this season as the previous 3 seasons combined. The scores have been better against a lot of these opponents, even if they didn't win. Last year they only won the 2 games. They've already doubled that and trying to add it. So, again, this is another chance for Tom Bean to be a spoiler. I think obviously they might look at everybody. They've already lost to Tioga to open district play. I could totally see them, saying to themselves, we can beat anybody in this district. We beat our rivals. Let's go ruin some seasons for some other people. And I think Tom Bean's capable of it. Again, I don't know if I could say I'd be surprised if any of the games that were left, if they won them. I don't know if I would say I'd be surprised, because I think they might be very capable of doing that. So that'll be an interesting one as Tom Bean hosts Alvord in District 6-2A Division 1 action on Friday night. Down in 8-2A Division 2, of course, that's where we find the Collinsville Pirates. They are coming off a 69-0 win over Era, and they are 6-1 and 3-0, and they are going to play Santo this week. Santo is 2-5, 1-2 in district play. This was a team that last year was a big challenger for the district title. Played Collinsville relatively tough, was 39-28. Obviously they've lost some key guys to graduation. It's not the same group as last year. They've already got their most losses in a season since 2020, and if Collinsville beats them, it'll be their worst season loss wise since 2017. So we talked about with the Era game last year, last week, was it going to be a trap game? It obviously was not a trap game because Collinsville scored all its points in the first half, 28-0 after the first quarter, and then puts up six touchdowns in the second quarter to roll to victory in that one. Defensively is probably the best place to start because it's real quick, and we say they held Era to 2 first downs, 4 total yards because they had negative 45 yards rushing. So a great job there. And then again, like they normally do on offense, it all revolves around the pass. And Logan Jenkins, 32 of 34 passing for 314 yards and 7 touchdowns. His little brother, J.J. Jenkins, throws a touchdown pass as well in this game. Landon Carpenter's the leading receiver, 11 catches for 116 yards and a touchdown. He also had a 60-yard interception return. Carter Scott, 6 catches for 70 yards and a touchdown. Rylan Newman, 7 catches for 67 yards and 3 touchdowns. And he also returned an interception, 40 yards for a score. So he had 4 touchdowns in the game. Colin Barnes, 4 catches for 38 yards and a touchdown. Reed Patterson, 2 catches for 23 yards and a touchdown as well. Chad Davidson catches a short touchdown pass. And I think that's everybody, but there's usually so many that you have to double check. And I think that is everybody. So again, Collinsville rolling along, a lot like we expected. Playing Santo this week, they can clinch a playoff spot. Them and Munster are the only undefeated teams. And that game is next week. So that is essentially going to decide the district title there. So again, you don't want to say it's a trap game. Collinsville has to make the long trip out to Santo. So you don't know how that's going to affect things, but it's a situation where Collinsville should take care of business. Munster is not going to have an easy game because they've got their rivalry game with Lindsay. Granted, it is at Munster, but that's obviously a huge game for them, and so you know they're not going to be able to cakewalk their way into the matchup as well, and they end with Celeste, so gonna be a big game between Munster and Collinsville next week, but the Pirates have to go take care of business at Santo, 7:00. With that long road trip on Friday, but I think they're, like I said, they haven't shown a whole lot of weaknesses so far, and I don't see that happening this week. If Munster and them are undefeated, I think that would be sort of a super interesting matchup, obviously, with everything at stake in the District 8-2A Division II standings next week. But again. You don't want to have. We thought it might be a trap game last week. It was not. I don't think it's going to be a trap game for either side this week, just because of what Munster-Lindsay means for that matchup. And Collinsville's just really focused. They're just really, they're just really kicking butt outside of the one loss again to a top 5 team in Division I. So, so we'll see what happens in that one. And then the last game we'll talk about this week. Is Texoma Christian. They are traveling to Azle Christian for TAPS Division III District 2 contest. TCS is 3-4 and 0-2 after it lost last week 50-0 against Crowley Nazarene, whereas Azle Christian won 52-0 against Bethesda Christian. So they are 5-2 and 1-1. And this is essentially a elimination game for the Eagles. Azle Christian will clinch a playoff spot with a win. Texoma Christian will be eliminated with a loss. And it's we talked about these standings. They're super small because there's only 5 teams. So you've only got 4 games to play with, and you've already lost to the top 2 teams in the standings. So basically, what it boils down to for TCS, you got to win this week against Azle Christian. You got to win against Bethesda Christian, which that obviously seems doable. Bethesda Christian is 1-6 on the season, so that seems like that's a doable thing. But this week is obviously the big one to try and make that happen as keeping things alive, because right now. Azle Christian is in position to lock up that final playoff spot, assuming things don't get crazy and Bethesda turns into a team that can make things happen. But like I said, it looks like those two are on a collision course to see who can stay out of the basement. Which again, it's been sort of a weird season for Texoma Christian. They've It's been up and down. Obviously, the last couple weeks have not gone well. They've really struggled to get some scoring going. It's going to be interesting going forward what they can build on. There's not a lot. There's basically it's basically all underclassmen. There's going to be some new districts because schools like Prestonwood, I forget who else in that district. Prestonwood, maybe Nazarene Christian are moving up in the latest realignment. So I think at this point, you're still in it. But again, you talk about a program that didn't exist last year, that is sitting at 3-4, has had some success to build on. And again, you've got a chance. You got to win the last two, so at the very least, you can go into these last two games saying, "Hey, it's just like the playoffs because we have to win." So that's Texoma Christian going on the road to Azle Christian for their TAPS Division III District 2 contest on Friday night. So that is a look at Week 9 coming up. Week 8, look back, see where we're at. We'll know a whole lot more after this Friday. I think we'll have a really, really good idea going into the last two games. I think we're going to have a handful of teams clinch their playoff spots, and hopefully some teams that are on the brink find a way to stay alive, at least to get through the last couple weeks, which is crazy that we're talking about. We're already in Week 9 and getting ready for talking about playoffs and seeding and all that other good stuff. So, again, thanks for tuning into the podcast. Follow the social media. Follow the All-Texomaland page on Facebook. Follow the Herald Democrat Facebook page. Follow me on X, formerly Twitter, at Jason De La Rosa for stats and scores and updates and all that sort of good stuff. I appreciate you tuning in. I appreciate you following. If you'd like to subscribe to the newspaper, go to our website, heralddemocrat.com. Find the link to subscribe. It's right there on the side. Little button. You can't miss it. I think it's worth it. I don't think we ask a lot for people to subscribe. If you like what I'm able to do and the help that I get in bringing you everything you need to know about high school sports, please consider subscribing because that goes a long way towards showing that what we're doing is being acknowledged. So again, enjoy your games this week. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. We'll talk to you next week. Have a happy football.